Me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Pawan Khera, who's our next speaker. He's the chairman of the Media and Publicity Department at the All India Congress Committee. His political journey started with the youth wing of the INC in 1989. In 1998, he rejoined the party after having served as a political secretary for the then Delhi CM. He was also the convener of a poll committee of the INC before the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Since 2019, many of you will have seen him representing the Congress in debates and discussions on various TV channels. We'll have a similar format to what we did this morning. Opening remarks from Mr. Khera for about 15 minutes or so. Then I have a couple of questions and then throw it open to the audience. Over to you.
Thank you, Prateek. It's an honor to come here to this historical institution. And it's an honor to represent my party and my country here. India since 1947 has traveled a huge distance. Last 75 years, if one were to give milestones for those last 75 years, it would be difficult, several milestones. And of course, if you guys are watching Indian TV channels and primetime debates, you would not, you don't have to laugh, let me finish my sentence. You wouldn't believe what all we've achieved in the last 75 years. So don't go by what the channels tell you. Congress party, I'll have to start talking about it right in my opening remarks because the journey of India in the last 75 years has also been the journey of the Congress party and the way the founding fathers shaped India's policy, India's worldview. So they're very deeply intertwined. A party which nationalized banks also happens to be the party which privatized and liberalized within 2.5 decades. So to respond and to adapt to changing times, to changing world order, to new technology, I think the Congress party has been at the forefront of any such adaptation, any such change. Now we are at a standstill in terms of wages, stagnating wages, in terms of inflation, in terms of unemployment, and in terms of social harmony, which becomes the greatest challenge to economic prosperity. So whenever we are at a standstill, there is a need again to adapt, to identify trends, patterns across the world, and see what will work best for India. I think that's where the challenge now is. I don't want to, because I was warned by Prateek and others in a very polite manner that don't try and get very political. So I'm not supposed to attack some of my friends sitting here and some of my friends who came here. So I won't attack. No, you want me to sit? I'm good, I'm good. But if there is no social harmony, you cannot expect economic prosperity. And when we talk about the economic policy for any country, for any society, what kind of economic model are we talking about? Are we talking about the extractive model, which not only extracts natural resources, which also treats governments as a resource? And then rent seeking happens, you know what happens, you know how exactly extractive economics works. Or are we talking about innovative, data-driven, technology-driven economy, which doesn't extract from environment not more than required, which doesn't displace people? So these are challenges that I think the Congress party is delving very deeply into. And the kind of economic policies that have been followed in the country over the last decade, 9.5 years. We see a lot of rent seeking. We see a lot of extraction. We see a lot of privileging of friends. Now, that leaves behind a large section of the unorganized sector. That leads to a lot of unemployment. That leads to disbalance, so to speak, within sectors and within the country, of course. So that's where our challenge is, how to undo the damage done by that kind of economic model. Rahul Gandhi, during the Bharat Jodo Yatra, was interacting with some jeans manufacturers of Bellary in Karnataka. I saw some people are from Karnataka, therefore I thought I'll give you the example of Karnataka. Here is a sector which has all the potential of being a thriving sector. But then the access to finance is the greatest challenge because they are not big enough. And of course, they are not close enough to the right people. So if they are given access to finance, the Bellary jeans industry can revolutionize the market. You heard about the Foxconn example. So we are not against big investment coming. We are not against corporates. We are not against capitalism. What we are talking against is cronyism. And that often people try and confuse the consumer of our communication, of our narrative, that, oh, Rahul Gandhi and Congress party are opposed to corporates. They are opposed to capitalism. No, sir. We are only talking against cronyism. We are only talking against extractive economic model. We are not talking against innovative economic model. We are not talking about coexistence of the Bellary jeans industry and perhaps Raymond's. So that's the challenge which we are addressing right now. On the social front, the challenge is even bigger. Because I guess we have been, as a party which was in power for 52.5 years out of these 75 years, I think we failed to see the trends in the world. We failed to re-articulate, redefine what centrism is all about. And centrism today needs to be very clearly, very loudly redefined by all of us who are adherents of centrism. Centrism is not against left or against right. Centrism is an amalgamation of both left and right. It is against extreme left and extreme right. And it's a beautiful amalgamation of both left and right. Now, if we are clear about what we stand for, I think centrism cannot be defeated because by and large, each one of us believes in centrism. And centrism is the only answer to economic prosperity, to employment, to social peace and harmony. So the challenge is to redefine what we stand for and what we stand against when we talk about centrism. There are people who question us that in the last 75 years, you had opportunities to ban extreme right-wing organizations. And I see a friend of mine nodding there, RSS. No, that's not the answer. That's not centrism. That's not liberalism. If you are not tolerant towards voices which are opposed to what you stand for, then where is your liberalism? Where is your centrism? So centrism is listen to everyone, let them be. Take that as a challenge, fight it logically, fight it through your articulation, through your narrative. Don't go about banning. What's the difference between us and those who have been asked not to name? So that difference is what centrism should be proud of. That difference is what I am proud of. That's what Congress party stands for. So I was asked to speak on the economic vision of the Congress party for India at 100, 2047. I'll give you a peek into that economic vision. Nyaya was that peak which Rahul Gandhi spoke of in 2019. Because of the kind of disparities which we are fighting, unemployment is one. As I said that stagnation of wages is a major issue right now. So if you have to fight these disparities, if you have to fight this stagnation, you need to intervene. The state must intervene, and social security is a need of the hour right now. So therefore, Nyaya was a concept which was brought out by the Congress party in 2019, and we fine-tuned it further, and we have implemented it in various shades in 2 of our states, and it is working out well. Karnataka is a recent state which we won, and you will see these innovative ideas of governance leading our politics instead of politics leading our governance. Now, that's a major difference that each one of us needs to understand. When your politics starts leading your governance, then your governance suffers and the country suffers. But when your governance, when you treat everyone as equal, when you respond to the demands by OBCs and by Dalits and by marginalized sections of the society, then you understand that it's your governance which will lead your politics. So I think let's start an interaction now. I can go on and on without naming those people. I can keep attacking them, but I think it's best that we start interacting, Pratik. Thank you all. Thank you all for the patience. Thank you. And Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So the first question I want to ask you is, you mentioned Nyay. What are some of the other priorities, maybe 2 or 3 priorities in terms of policy leading up to the general election next year?
What the demonetization did to the unorganized sector of the economy in our country is something that needs to be undone. So I deliberately gave you the example of the Bellary jeans industry. There are several such pockets of potential pockets of huge possibility of generating employment and giving a boost to the economy. Those pockets are identified. You don't have to identify them. They are the ones who need access to finance. I think that's where we need to intervene in terms of policy when we come to power.
In the Karnataka, one of the strength of the INC campaign was to focus on local state issues rather than national themes. Is that something, again, in terms of policy, that's something you're going to try and replicate in Madhya Pradesh and some of the other elections that are coming? And if so, what are some of those important state issues?
We've always, over the last 9 or 10 years, I have been part of several assembly campaigns. And we've always focused on local issues. What the other side does is tries to nationalize the election, tries to bring, for example, the Karnataka election was all about one man's face, the man who you asked me not to name. So his face in all the posters and all the merchandise on everything. If you were not from Karnataka or if you're not from India, you wouldn't know whose election it is. There was just one man. So contrast with that was the party which was talking about local issues and local faces, local narrative. Of course, it worked. Nandini versus Amul was a fascinating case study of how an election campaign should be run. So several such examples from Karnataka and from other states also, where these are the issues on which elections have to be fought. In fact, it's not just local issues. It's also bringing the electoral narrative back to where it belongs or where it should belong. You can't be talking about hijab, for God's sake. How does hijab, anybody wearing hijab in this hall, bother me? It doesn't bother me. And why should it bother me? So there is a deliberate attempt to shift the focus away from local issues to irrelevant, divisive, polarizing fault lines which exist, no doubt, but they can be sort of ignored. You don't have to really focus on those fault lines. Congress party over the last 75 years and even more, even during the freedom struggle, worked, survived, governed despite these fault lines. But here we have a party which wants to survive, wants to govern, wants to thrive because of the fault lines. So that difference is very clear. We've been working, governing despite the fault lines. Here are the people who are not only depending on the fault lines, they're also increasing those fault lines. So that difference is what we need to communicate to the people, whether it was in Karnataka, whether it will be in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Mizoram, and Telangana, or in the 2024 elections.
So full disclosure, as a Gujarati, 90% of my news comes from my family WhatsApp groups.
Oh God, you're a dangerous man.
And one of those things the WhatsApp groups say is
This is going to be interesting.
that there is Prime Minister Modi and BJP on the one side, and then a whole bunch of opposition parties on the other side that are fighting the next election. Some of those parties are not necessarily ideologically aligned, yet there's a lot of talk about having some kind of common platform. Where do you see that common platform aligning ahead of 2024? And what are some of those areas where you can maybe come together, where there's not that maybe friction with regional parties or other national parties?
Look, there are, I won't respond to the WhatsApp part of the message, but there are regions in the country where the Congress is very strong. My friend Atishi may or may not agree with me here. And there are regions where we are not so strong, but we have every right to try and attempt to get more strong there. Right now, the priority, of course, is to save the Constitution of India, to save democracy in India. It may sound bizarre to you, but that is a challenge right now, here and now. It's not a challenge in future, it's here and now. So we are willing to accommodate, there's no doubt about that. And there are other regional parties also are willing to accommodate. So the common ground is to protect democracy. I'll talk of another WhatsApp group. I also have some WhatsApp groups. This is also from Gujarat. 3 days ago, I got a message. Sir, in Hindi, sir, kuch kariye. Agar 2024 ये दोनों जीत जाते हैं, तो 29 में चुनाव नहीं होगा. So this is the kind of fear people have, that if these people come again to power in 2024, you may not have elections in 2029. So that's also a kind of fear which we need to address. So if any responsible party, whether it's a regional party or a national party, will need to understand the kind of apprehensions people have about democracy in India.
So I have one more question, and then I'm going to throw it open to the floor. So if you are thinking of asking something, you've got a couple of minutes to think about it and articulate it. But when you ask your question, make it really brief so we can get through as many questions as possible. In 24 years, India will be 100 years old. What's your one big idea for the year 2047? That if you were to fast forward from today to 2047, you could say, you know what, this has changed in India. And this is amazing. I'm really proud.
I think dignified living, access to basic livelihood, dignified livelihood, is something which would be our aspiration as a political party, our dream as an Indian. It's my dream. How we reach that, what kind of policies should be put in place for that, is something which consultation is very important. It has to be based on widespread consultations with different social groups, with different people, different sectors. Without consultation, that's another difference between us and them. We believe in consultations, we believe in consensus, they believe in conflict. So that difference also defines what we stand for. In 24 years from now, what we would like to have is an India where there is dignified living for one and all.
If you've got any questions, put your hand up and I'll come to you. So, okay, so we'll have one here. We'll take one at a time. So one here, then here, and then we'll go to the back. Do we have a mic? So first here.
Is that the mic?
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
Hi, myself Bharat. I'm studying development studies at the Institute of Development Studies. I'm also a Channing scholar from India. So since we are talking about India at 100 and towards becoming a global leader or Vishwa Guru, so it's more on the inclusive growth on the topic as well. So before we become a global leader, what are the 3 key aspects that India should address internally to have an inclusive growth? And I might also highlight about hunger and inequalities which are multidimensional. So what are the things that, what are the key policies that would be crucial in addressing the bottom of the pyramid and making it more inclusive? Thank you.
I won't talk about policy at this stage. As I said, policy can't be done in isolation. It has to be done through consultation, but broad vision for what are the three issues that you need to address internally before you talk about global? I get your question. I think social harmony is number one. Number two is to address the economic disparities within the country. Wages are a very, very important aspect which we have to focus on as a party. We are focusing on it. The new labor laws in the country do away with any rights of the labor. There is nothing called labor rights anymore after the new legislation on labor rights in India. So these are the two issues. And the third issue definitely would be addressing the unorganized sector, because that creates employment in our country. That's the biggest source of employment in our country. So these three aspects, and then free global trade is a misnomer these days. It's at a standstill again. It's friendshoring going on, and look at the way China is addressing its issues and expanding. So these three internal issues, if we need to address, then we can talk about our role in the global economic arena.
Namaskar, Pawanji. I'm Hitesh, currently doing MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development. Thanks for the talk that you gave. You talked about saving democracy and constitution, and the same constitution gives us the right to life. And when we talk about right to life, we have to talk about health. And if we see there is a study in Lancet that India stands in healthcare access and quality index 145 out of 195 countries, and this is not good. And we have to work and invest immensely in this sector. And we had several governments since independence, and Congress were for the most of the time. And so my question to you is, how you are prioritizing, or your party is prioritizing, health in the general election 2024 and even in several states? Thank you.
Well, this brings me to the Rajasthan model of Chiranjeevi Health Scheme. If you've some of us are from Rajasthan here also. So that scheme is, I would say, a template for other states also, and for also at the national level. How to address universal health is something which Rajasthan has shown the way. 25 lakh, 2.5 million worth of health benefits, surgeries, medication, free through the government. And he's done it very well. It's implemented. I can see someone smiling here. But it is a model which needs to be replicated by other states also. So I agree with you. We are all concerned about and COVID, I think, exposed the reality of the health system in India, healthcare system in India, where people were desperate for oxygen, desperate for hospital beds, desperate for medicines. That exposed us. And some of our state governments, especially Rajasthan, responded very well to that challenge and has created a template for others to follow.
So we've got one question there, then we'll take another question from this side, and then we'll come over to him.
Hi, sir. My name is Prajwal. I'm studying international politics at SOAS. So my question is, what is the foreign policy vision of the Congress going to look like in 2024? What do you think, like, India's future relationship with the West should be? Should we hedge our bets on the West in tackling China, or should we follow our path of strategic autonomy, as the current government puts it? So how will the Congress government in 2024 tackle the China challenge?
Strategic autonomy is what the current government says, but non-alignment was what was the original name of this policy. And it was brought by Jawaharlal Nehru and successive Congress governments and successive governments. Foreign policy, the underlying theme is self-interest. There's no denying that. it can't be a very individual-centric, cult-centric foreign policy that you see these days. It has to be India's interests and not one ruler's interests. You know, can I name him? Okay. So where we are at the crossroads where our relationship with our neighbors, whether it's Bhutan, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's China, of course, Pakistan, is a huge question mark. And to reset the foreign policy would essentially mean to go back to where we were in terms of foreign policy. Foreign policy, you don't bring radical changes, whether governments change or not. Foreign policy is known for its continuity. And as I said, self-interest is what should lead our foreign policy. There is the China challenge. The world order also needs countries like India to play a harmonizing role. There is a chip war going on, a very fascinating war. So, as I said, India will need to understand, without the heroism involved, without the what this man is known for, that we have played over the last 7 decades, a very crucial role in harmonizing the contradictions that exist in the world order.
So just in case there's any confusion, I think you're talking about the Prime Minister.
I didn't say anything. It's a fellow Gujarati who's saying it. So.
But one question here?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I'm Zoe Gangan. I work with organic cotton farmers in India on circular textiles. My question was around, you spoke about governance running politics and not the other way around. So if I have to give one of the examples of one of the policies that you said, building policies for that, one of the policies that Congress implemented was around RTI. And it gave an opportunity for transparency through points like suo motu. But we know the implementation of how it has gone down over the years. If given an opportunity today to re-implement that policy, how would it be different and how it would reach the last mile according to you?
We are in touch with a lot of civil society organizations to come up with RTI 2.0. How do you sharpen it more? How do you empower the recipient of the information more, the consumer of policy more? Under this government, of course, RTI is dying of unemployment. I mean, there is nothing happening in RTI. So under our government, you will see a different version of RTI. It is at the stage of conceptualization at this stage, and we are having consultations with several experts on this. Ask him. Our political rivals supposed to.
So one question, and then we'll come over to this side. So just raise your hand.
I like the mic. So I agree with many things you said. I think that there is definitely a challenge to democratic norms. There's a challenge to the constitution that the country faces today. And Delhi and the Aam Aadmi Party government has very much been at the center of that in terms of the attack on the Delhi government. What I would like to know from you, as you know that recently, about a few weeks ago, an ordinance was passed by the central government, taking away a lot of the powers that Delhi government was given by a 5-0 constitution bench Supreme Court order. Now that is likely to come up for vote in the Rajya Sabha sometime in the month of July. And as you know that in Lok Sabha, the BJP has a majority, but in Rajya Sabha, it doesn't. So I would like to know how the Congress party is planning to vote on that when the ordinance taking away the power of a democratically elected government, which has even put the Constitution, the Supreme Court, its decisions under threat. How will the Congress party vote for that?
We can discuss it over a phone call next week when you're back.
We have been trying to get hold of that phone call for a while, but...
Having said that, we were in power in Delhi for 15 years. out of which 5 years was the BJP government at the center and 10 years was the UPA at the center. We did face issues with both UPA and NDA, but never did it reach a point of breakdown. Because essentially the then Chief Minister believed in consultations, believed in not conflict, because that conflict doesn't do anything for the people of Delhi. So we not only did well in those 15 years, we created the largest metro network, we removed all the industries from residential areas, we built 155 flyovers, new hospitals, new schools, new universities. Despite at times central government which was not friendly. There were times when either the entire government was BJP and not friendly, or some elements within the government were not cooperating, yet we managed to deliver. So I mean, this can be discussed when we, at some debate on some television channel between you and me, that how did we manage and how were you not able to manage? So that's a different debate which we need to also, at some point, let's discuss this also. So that's a style of consultation which always works in India. You'll never fail if you adopt that style. If you adopt the style of Mr. Modi, which is conflict, obviously it will reach a stage of breakdown, which it has in Delhi, which is unfortunate. And who's paying the price? Not the Chief Minister, not the Prime Minister. The price is being paid by every single Delhi wala.
I can just see the headline back home, Chai Pe Charcha in Cambridge. We've got a question. We've got a question here.
Don't give her a supplementary.
I was really tempted.
I know, I could see that.
Yeah, one.
May I ask you? Sure. So, thank you for the talk. And it's good to hear about the Congress vision in terms of economic reform, but it'd be interesting to hear from you who is going to lead this reforms from the Congress party. And it'd be exciting to hear who is going to be the leader.
Why do you want to leave one cult and go into another cult? Why do we talk about who? What we should be interested in what, not who. What and how is what is more relevant than who. It's a group, it's all of us. It's so many of I mean, the Congress party has the best talent, pool of talent across the country. So we have Rahul Gandhi, who has his heart in the right place. We have wise people like Mr. Kharge, we have Mr. Chidambaram, we have so many of them. So all of us will contribute to nation building. So don't get into this who business. Who business is to distract from the what business and the how business.
Hello, so thank you for the talk. My name is Chandan. I work at Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance here at Judge Business School. I think you have in part answered my question. My question was, like, there's a lot of talk about democracy, but I think one institution that is not a great model of democracy is the inner workings of most of the political parties in India. It's very cult specific and it really moves very quickly away from ideas and ideology and the plan of action. And it just moves from if you like the person or and also it's very much about high command culture, like there's only very set specific people who take the decisions for a party, which may have like millions of people. So it doesn't come across a very democratic way of functioning. And maybe we as citizens are to blame, or maybe there's not strong enough constitutions or laws to protect us from it. But it very quickly moves away from what should be like a very inclusive democracy. We've seen it in the regional parties as well. So most of it just very quickly moves away from very democratic institution to very sometimes autocratic.
I think you're talking about BJP and other parties. As far as the Congress party is concerned, we are the only party which is proud to have an election, an elected president. Ask anybody from any other party, whether regional or national, if they've had an election. When was the last time they had an election to elect their president?
Yeah.
So ours is a very, very democratic party. And at times we have a problem of plenty. With too much of democracy. It's also not good, according to me personally, but my leadership thinks that that's the kind of democracy which is important in the party. And I think we are very proud to have that democracy within the party.
But what about the other parties?
I can't speak for them. I can't speak for them.
Hi. The challenge that I see for what we call liberal democracy or center party globally, this is not only in India, is can they deliver in terms of the narrative and in terms of actual delivery and nationalism? And if you look at all populist leaders who have come globally, right-wing, are basically thriving on the issue that they're able to deliver what they're saying, and they're also a spirit of nationalism. Do you think that is true? And if yes, how do you think as a Congress party, which is mostly, as you said, center to left or center to right or centrist, and how do you think about A, nationalism, and B, delivery of,
The difference between patriotism and nationalism is something very clear in my mind, at least. And to use nationalism to other groups within the country is not the answer at all. And we've been watching this over the last 10 years a lot. That you use nationalism and an entire community. That's not what can work in this country. As far as the centrist ideology, whether we are able to communicate in simple terms, our narrative is a challenge which we have now come to terms with. We are grappling with it, and we have understood. The other side simplifies everything very well. Most complex issues can be simplified by the other side very well because of the kind of ideology it is. It's me versus you, us versus them. It's very simple. And then invoke history somewhere and try and widen the fault lines. What is difficult is the job of the centrist ideology. There are fault lines. You can't skirt away from those fault lines. You have to talk about them also. But how do you manage these contradictions is a challenge. What we've been watching over the last 9-10 years is that politicization of the society is being done not by the opposition, not by the civil society, not by the media, not by the intellectuals, but by the government. Now, that is a bizarre scenario where the society is getting politicized, not by people who should politicize the society, but by the government on issues of their choice. That's where I come back to politics governing governance, leading the governance. So on what issues should we politicize the society is what the centrist elements need to put their minds on, focus on. On class differences, that's a big aspect which really needs a lot of focus of the society, of the media, and the narrative has to be shifted to this. I think Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra did that very well. The class differences are so stark, but nobody talks about it. So those challenges were articulated very well during the Bharat Jodo Yatra and subsequently also in the Karnataka elections.
We've got time for 2 very short questions now before we have to end it. We're gonna play a kind of logistical game here. If you throw it 2 rows behind you, white shirt, and then we'll come onto this side.
Hi, so thank you for being here. So since it's a conference about inclusive growth and we're talking about India at 100, when we talk about India at 100, we think about this demographic advantage that India has, but at the same time, we think about the employment rate for women, which is about 20% in India. My question would be, what would the Congress do differently than the BJP to increase employment rate for women for India to be really able to explore this demographic advantage on the global scene?
This immediately brings to my mind the insistence on the Congress party to have reservations in the parliament and the assemblies for women, 33%. We've been fighting for it. We never had the majority in the parliament to ensure that we pass that. It got passed in one house of the parliament, but got stuck in the other. So that is a top priority for us.